Peace be upon you. I hope you enjoyed the previous video. Before I start the story, I will remind you to activate the bell to receive every new video. I hope you have a great time. Today's story revolves around a mysterious letter found on a mountainside, and its content affects the lives of 3 people forever. Jenna Ellendutt, 24, was lost in the desert in the San Jacinto Mountains with her new boyfriend Brandon, 28. Fortunately, something happened to them that changed their lives forever. While they were wandering around the place, they looked down at the valley and saw a camp. In the same place, there was a piece of green cloth tied between 2 trees, and it looked like a tent. They quickly ran to the place in the hope of finding the person who camped there to help them get out of those mountains. But when they reached the camp, they found no one. But it seems that someone who lived there did not spend long time on his departure. Under the piece of fabric, there was a sleeping bag. In addition to the yellow bag, Gina and Brandon were hungry, tired, and miserable without hesitation. He searched the middle of the items in the camp so that they could find some things that could save their lives, such as cell phones, radio. Among the things she found, a map with several points and notes on her palm. It seems that she wrote it recently. Gina didn't pay attention to it and put it aside. She looked at it and read the top palm of the map. A note that made her leave everything she was doing and didn't believe what was written. But she quickly understood what she had read and started to check the map. Then she started laughing hysterically and called Brandon. Brandon stopped searching and took the map. He laughed and screamed, "We did it!" In the middle of the map, there was a familiar scene from the same day they were there, 8th of May. He realized that he had not been away from the owner of the camp for 2 hours or less. He stopped and took 2 screams and called out to him. Because of their excitement and desire to get out of that place, they ignored the important details in the map, which will change their lives and the lives of the owner of the camp forever. Before Brandon and Gina start their journey in the San Jacinto mountain range, there was another man who didn't know if he was ready to take on the adventure of walking a long distance in the same mountain range. His name is John Donovan. On April 19th, 2005, John was a man aged 59 years old. He lives alone and has no family. He became an orphan at the age of 10 and lived alone. In his 20s, he moved to Virginia where he worked as a social worker. Despite getting a good salary, he refused to spend money because he had been following a habit he had developed since he was a child. He was trying to cover his needs without using money. This habit grew with him until the day he went out on a walk. For a long time in 2005, for the rest of his life, John was always in the same clothes. He never had a car or a computer, nor even a mobile phone. Even his residence was always in a cheap house and not available for life demands. He even once lived in an abandoned hotel that did not have heating. John was an Irish Catholic, proud. He drank a lot of whiskey. He didn't hesitate to start his opinion, regardless of who he was talking to, and that made him a loved one. But his appearance was like a friendship between him and his life. When John was in his 40s, he wanted to lose some weight, so he decided to join a long-distance walking club. Unexpectedly, his companions loved him in the club a lot, and they always praised him and said that his presence increases the enjoyment of the trip. He also loved them and considered them his family, which he did not get. He no longer makes any calls because those were the most important moments in his life. Although John was often walking at a distance of 4,000 miles per year, he always lost in the paths he walked on dozens of times. Although he was aware of that, he never tried to fix it. For example, he does not take a bus with him on his trip, and it is the first thing he should think about taking with him on the journey of walking in the mountains. He also always refuses to buy a cell phone, which is his job to help him in the case of loss. In fact, John did not carry any things with him until he was called on the light trip. John's friends always advised him to carry a lot of things, but without hesitation, because he often refused to argue that he knew what he was doing. But in fact, it faces many difficulties in all of his trips, which are often in mountains and hills, like his trip in the Long Colorado, which was 500 miles away, and the trip to Appalachia, where it was 2107 miles away. John considered his success in the flights a great achievement and considered himself a skilled flight. But his friends say he is very lucky because he was often lost and saved at the last moment. Sometimes, the flight that he met by chance provided him with some additional equipment. Once, when John was traveling in Poland, he fell behind 2 other people on an ice bridge. His head was stuck in a tree and he was saved, while the others fell and he was found unconscious. Since that day, he has been following the same path in his travels and using it as In April 2005, John and one of his close friends decided to walk a long distance, called Ken Baker, who was about the same age as him, to walk 2650 miles and extends to the far north of Washington on the Canadian border. The trip will last for 5 months if the weather is not bad. John was very excited about this long trip, and he was planning it with passion as he wrote 6 pages on the special machine. He wrote in it all the details, the roads and the routes, even the number of cups of coffee that will be served during the trip. John was very excited about this trip because it is the first trip he will make after his government job. John had many plans for the next trip. He wanted to travel all over the United States. He planned to travel to Australia, China, and Russia. He wanted to travel for 6 months each year, until he grows old or becomes unable to travel. Unexpectedly, 2 days before the trip, Kahinda Jones said that he must postpone the trip for 3 weeks because the south of California is experiencing a snowfall that has not happened before, and it will be out of the logic the journey in the middle of the snow and the storms, and he must wait until the snow melts and the weather improves. John completely refused the idea of a vacation because he was very excited about the trip and he could not wait any longer. He told Ken that he would travel at a certain time with him or without him. On April 19, 2005, they were preparing to go to his office where he worked. His colleagues were waiting for him. They held a humble sitting party for him. Then he left the office and headed directly to the airport. Johnny traveled to Southern California alone, and when he arrived, he contacted one of his old friends in walking sports, Len Puget, 48 years old. Puget told him that he heard about his trip and offered to accompany him because he was also heading for the top of the John was very excited and told him that he would be happy to accompany him. He headed to Campo, California, which is located directly on the Mexican border. He started a journey along the road to the quiet ocean. Suddenly, after a distance of 100 miles, the old man began to wander and his pain was severe. So he was unable to continue his journey, and so he had to return. And so, John completed the journey alone. The San Jacinto mountain range is the first mountain range that John will cross at the top of the Pacific Ocean, and it is the most dangerous part of the region where 15% of deaths occur there. It is a steep mountain that rises to more than 10,000 feet, which makes it very cold, even in the summer. When the weather is hot in its base, the weather is stormy and icy at its peak. On May 2nd, John reached the San Jacinto mountain range and began climbing slowly. He had many trips on his way, and they all talked about the great snowfall coming in the next 2 days. To the mountain exit heading towards the small town there, until the storm ends, because the summit of the San Jacinto mountain range is the most dangerous part of the mountain range, and it is very steep where only 1 foot has descended, which may lead you to fall and die. Despite all this, John did not stop because of the snowfall, and the best way is not to be confused. He continued to climb the hill for the rest of the day. Then he stopped and set up a camp in the middle of the road near 2 other climbers. He decided to climb without any hesitation. David is 46 years old from Canada, with the company of his son Alex, 20 years old. They seemed to be 2 experienced climbers. He was very ready and carried with him all the things to steal. That night, John found out about what had happened. Without any intention, John argued in some comments about the way Coney was raised, which angered her, but it did not show that to John. The next morning, when John woke up, he found Coney and her son. He has enjoyed them and left them for a long time. He looked up to the sky and it was still clear, but it seems that there is a cloud of sand coming towards him, and it must be a snowstorm. Despite this, he will not give up and will not give up. He turned around and started walking. After a short while, he met 3 people who were well prepared. They were surprised. They did not recognize John, but he stopped them and asked them about the weather in the upper part of the country. They looked at John, surprised. They looked at him, and he was wearing a light dress and a sports shoe and did not carry any tools. One of them said to him, "I think you should go back. It will be a strong storm at any time, and you will not be able to escape it. Look at us. We are well equipped, but we do not want to wander ourselves. I really advise you to return." But John was determined to continue, so they wished him luck and left him. John continued climbing, and despite his increased confidence in himself and defense, doubts began to grow about his ability to continue. John was afraid of losing the road because of the snow, but because of his carelessness, he continued the journey. After he cut him off a mile or 2, he saw 2 passengers in front of him. He ran towards them and started screaming and calling them. The ice was falling like a storm and it completely covered the road. He could almost see things in front of him. The passengers stopped and turned to him. He ran towards them, and when he approached them, he found that it was me and her son Alex. It didn't seem to be a good thing to see John again, and he doesn't know the way because of the ice and only to accompany them. But she said that she will not climb to the top of the mountain chain. It will take longer, but it is safer than the weather. John told her that was a good thing. He would follow them, and at a certain point he would separate from them and climb to the top of the mountain. And he was wearing a sports shoe that was not loose. He tried to tie it with a rope to make it easier for the process to move, but it was not appropriate and caused him to fall and fall continuously. He was falling and trying to catch up with them, but he was always late. Coney and Alex reached the point where they were supposed to be. They must be careful to avoid the slope, otherwise Jonah will reach the summit. Coney and her son went to John to inform him about the matter, but he was very far from them and would take a long time to get to know each other. She said to Alex, "John said he will continue climbing, and he is an overbearing man, and he knows what he says, and he may do what he wants." Then she screamed and yelled at John and pointed to her and her son going down to the elevator, and the other way will take you to the top of Volar. Then he left. When John reached the point of escape, the storm intensified and the whole view was blocked. Suddenly, John decided to return to the city where the passengers were going to escape. And he fell down, but the problem is the road is completely gone, and there are no other passengers around him, and even if someone was here, he wouldn't be able to see him because of the snow. John continued on the journey for several hours, and he was exhausted from his effort to get out of there, and when the sun was setting, he stopped and looked around. He was not aware of where he was. For a moment, he saw many lights flashing through the mountains and realized that they were the lights of a nearby city. He then followed them and walked through the valley, avoiding stones, trees, and animals. After hours of walking, he reached a very remote area called the Long Valley. And there, he had to choose either to go down from a 2-meter high cliff and cross the valley, or go back up and climb around it and walk a long distance. John didn't know what to do. All he cared about was going down the mountain because he was in a bad situation. And if he didn't find a shelter nearby, he would freeze to death. At the end of the trail, he decided to descend from the cliff. He leaned on his stomach and he slipped down. When he reached the cliff, he found a wall and he followed him, eager to reach the bottom of the mountain. The more he walked, the tighter the edges of the valley and the water approached more. But there was still a long way to go, and suddenly, he didn't see the valley anymore. and on some steps he discovered a huge waterfall which he thought would stop his time. But he turned back because he realized that if he fell from there, he would die. John was so confused that he couldn't get out of the waterfall and he couldn't climb the cliff where he first fell. He found himself completely trapped in that valley. John left the waterfall and returned to a flat area in one of the sides of the valley, where he set up a green cloth piece between two trees as a roof and laid under it a bed and slept that night. The next morning, John tried to light the fire to warm up, but he could not find any dry wood. All was. He took a look to the sky to see a flying plane and gave it a signal, but without a sign. No plane passed over him, and another day passed and he was still not in that place. The next day, John's hair was very loose, and he decided to start recording notes on his map. If he doesn't leave there, they will know what happened to him. The same day, Brandon and Gina decided to leave the hotel and go to Noosa. They joined a touristic group heading through the air route to the top of the mountain range of San Jacinto, where they will see beautiful places and beautiful views. Brandon and Gina climbed to the summit, enjoying the view of the forests covered with snow. When they arrived, they were told that they should return after 20 or 30 minutes to return to their steps from the bottom of the mountain. Brandon and John decided to separate from the group to spend some time alone. And while they were touring the Arja, they heard the sound of the water and thought they were close to a waterfall. He followed the sound and went out of the way, thinking that the waterfall might be just a few minutes away if he wanted to go meet some photos and return to the group. But something strange was happening. They have cut a long distance and they did not find anything. It seemed that the waterfall sound was getting further away every time I felt that they were getting closer, as if he was playing with them and deceiving them. But something they didn't know is that the sound they heard was the sound of the waterfall echoing on the walls of the mountain, making them feel that it is strange and it is not. Finally, he reached the waterfall and immediately realized that they had been adventuring and had escaped from the group, and they must have encountered difficulties in finding the way, and the air route photographer met with a man next to a waterfall. Then two cyclists left towards the station and on the way back, which was sure that the road was the right one. The tourists heard the sounds coming from the platform, but it was coming from another direction, and they were deceived for the second time because of the thunder, and they went an unknown way. Suddenly, the voices stopped, and no one was heard. Looking at their watch, they realized that they had missed the last flight to the... He did not get hurt, and said that they will definitely find the way to the station, and they will seek help, and they will return to the city or find a public phone and call for help. Brandon and Gina planned to go out for a while with the group of tourists, then return to the hotel before dinner time. Therefore, they did not bring any equipment with them until they left their mobile phone, because they wanted to take advantage of the moment and did not want to be disconnected. Even their clothes were light suits and sports shoes, and he carries only what he has preserved without water or food. Brandon and Gina started searching. They spent several hours without any sign. The sun set and the temperature started to drop. On their way, they found a cave and spent the night there. The next morning, they went out and started searching again. The safety of the after a few hours, they reached a very high area where they see the whole area around them. But they did not reach the mosque station. There is nothing but mountains and trees. So they decided to walk down the mountain, and the tourist guide may have noticed their absence. But he expected them to be at the top of the mountain and have settled down another climb before the group. And because of this, he did not report anyone. And so Brandon and Jean went down the mountain. The road was full of rocks, trees, and trees that were blocking their way. It was a really amazing experience. And in the sunset, he didn't know where they were and felt that they were surrounded in the wilderness. So he spent another night in the wilderness, and this time he didn't find a cave to protect them from the cold and the wind, so he slept and ate. By the morning of the third day, Brandon and Gina woke up and headed down, trying to get out of that place as soon as possible. After a few hours of walking, they reached the long valley, the same valley that Jonah was in. He stood on the edge of the cliff, and he took a step out of the place and asked himself, should we jump down? But this means that we cannot pray again. They were exhausted and couldn't go back to the other direction. Just like what John did, he put his back on their stomach and went down the valley. When he stopped, he saw a small river and ran towards it. He drank from it, then started walking and discovered the road. Suddenly he saw a green piece of cloth tied to the trees and himself, John's camp. Brandon ran to the camp and took a look at John's belongings, and after reading the notes, he stopped and took 2 shots of the camp owner to come and help them. But no one came out of the trees. Brandon went to the reminder and looked at it again and discovered that the notice was written on May 8th, 2005, and now it is in 2006, which means that a year has passed since the writing of the notice, and it was not necessary that Jonah was lost in this place last year. Their happiness was satisfied with success and turned into fear, and he continued to search for John's belongings and found all the metal things he had found, like the oars, spoons, and pans, and his body became empty as if he had spent a very long time on it while it was in the same place. He also found his wallet, which contained his identity card, and now he has become known as the owner of the camp and the reminder, John Donovan. So, Gina and Brandon opened all the maps so that they could find other notes, and they found 2 notes. The first one, on May 10th, John says that he thinks far from this, and unfortunately, he eats the last piece of the cheese crunch. And in the last note on May 14th, he wrote the following: I'm heading to the waterfall for water. Farewell. I love you all. The husband realized that these were the last words of John, and his body must be in a place nearby. He really felt the horror. John seemed to be a trained thief who had all these equipment and a ring here, and it is suggested that he died. How can they survive without enough experience and equipment? Jean gathered John in the yellow tent and went with Brandon away from the camp, hoping to find a way out. But they reached the riverbank, where there is a waterfall that descends hundreds of feet, and realized that they are completely trapped in that area, like John. He sat silently, looking at each other and thinking, oh my God, what will happen to us? We will be destroyed here like John, completely. And suddenly Gina ran after John and took out all the items again. Brandon asked her what she was doing. She said, maybe there is something we didn't notice. Maybe they have a secret pocket and something that can help us. And she had a doubt in his shop. He found a plastic bag with a lot of heavy things inside. Brandon and Gina took it and tried to light some of the roots, but it was empty and did not catch fire. He continued trying until the sun went down. He was struck by the loss of hope and returned to the camp of John and spent another cold night under the green cloth. The next morning, Brandon woke up and left Jean sleeping and went to take some fresh air. He was very tired and hungry, but he wanted to sit alone for a while and think. He went to the riverbank and looked up and maybe found a way down. When he looked at the water tank below the waterfall, he saw something he had never seen before. He saw 3 people with their faces turned away. He was sure that it was John Brandon. Although he was far away from her, he realized that she was there without a doubt. Brandon did not feel fear or sadness. He felt that he was taking a slap on his face, as if one of them took him there and said, "You will die if you do not behave." He decided that he would find a solution, even if he had to completely burn the forest so that people would see it and come to save them. He returned to the camp and took the clothes of the... Then he headed for the forest, which was close to their camp, and found a dead tree. He surrounded it with a group of dry wood and lit the fire in it, and it burned immediately. It burned very fast. Even Brandon ran away from the place. So as not to burn, he went to the camp, and Gina woke up and ran to the riverbank and took the 2 witnesses of the fire, which had consumed half of the fire, and the black smoke that is rising from it to the sky. Suddenly, after an hour, Brandon and Gina heard the sound of a helicopter approaching them, realizing that they had seen the smoke and came to rescue them. Brandon and Gina were rescued from that place, and after 3 weeks, John Donovan's body was found. John's death was not identified, so some say that the last notice he left on May 14th, when he wrote that he was going to the waterfall for water, was a suicide note. They said that he threw himself out of the waterfall to put an end to his suffering. Some others said that he went to the waterfall to drink water and slipped and met a snake, but no one really knows what happened to him. The confirmed fact is that he died with and if the fire didn't burn, no one would have thought of searching for them in that place. Therefore, Brandon and Gina say that they owe their lives to John Donovan on July 11th, 2006 in Virginia. John's funeral was attended by 80 people, most of whom were his old friends to the audience. Then he went to his friend's grave, and he told the audience that he was thinking about John for a long time, and that he misses him so much as he sees him in his sleep daily. He sees him walking in the street, then he touches green cloth from a distance and he feels that John is under it. But when they reach the piece of cloth, they find nothing but shoes lying on the rocks. Brandon and Gina will continue together, but they will separate after 2 years. This was the end of our story for today. I hope you enjoyed listening to it. As usual, don't forget to press the like button and share this video with your friends, and subscribe to the channel for more fun stories. Greetings and goodbye.